Hi everybody, welcome back to Flames Pyro Art for Beginners, and we're going to carry on looking at our Dobby piece today. We're going to do a bit of work around his face, around his eye and his nose. I started some work on his ear the other day, which we need to do more work on, but I thought we would have a look at noses. I'm using the medium space shader from the Optima, and I've got my setting at around 2.5 at the moment. So when we're looking at building the dimensions of a nose, we start off obviously at the very base of the nose of the nostril. Now on Dobby, obviously he's got a funny shaped nose because he's a goblin. But what we're looking to try and create is the effect that this nose is sitting forward from the board. We're looking for a 3D effect. So to start with, we can block in some of the underneath of this nostril. Just dab in a bit of the dark line. Now, because his nose obviously is so big and pointed, the nose is casting a shadow, and this shadow casts all the way from here down to his lips. And then the other side casts off there. So we have to bear that in mind, that this is a lot of shadowing of Dobby's nose because it's sticking out, isn't it? So this is a great way of showing more depth to a piece. Now what I usually do, I'm going to turn the heat down a little more and take the heat out of the pen, just by dabbing it on my board, is with the actual trunk of the nose. We want to start building some shape to it. So all along the bottom edge is like the underneath of the nose. So by moving up in the direction that we want to go, sticking within our guidelines, our pencil lines, using 3/4 of the side of the pen for this, we can start to build some shape to a goblin's nose. Down here, so I'm going to turn the board round, is where his nostril goes off, and so there is a shadow being cast because if you remember from my last discussion about when we started Dobby, the light is coming in from his left, our right, so there's going to be shadows cast more on this side of the face compared to that side. So when we're building a nostril on a low heat, we're flicking upwards in the direction and shape that we want to make the object appear. Until we get to the main trunk, which, like I said, it's running down here. And if you remember from previous lessons, when we're doing shading of something, if the shadowing is coming off to this side, we want to be burning to the right side, because then any little heat bleed we get will be coming to the right side of the shadowing. So we wouldn't go from that side because it would give the darkness more to there. So when we're casting shadows, make sure you're doing it from the correct side of the shadow. So it's going to be a lot of board turning here. Okay, now the outside of the nostril is always at its darkest point where it meets under the skin, and and around the skin with this goblin. So we add, just with the tip of the pen, a dark line that sits underneath. Just to give that perception that this nostril isn't sitting flat to the board. And then another thing we think about is like the depth of, let's say take this nostril for example. It's going to have a side to it, so we have to start showing the side, and we do that just by, I'm just using more of the edge of the pen and gently flicking my way in. Until I can build the side wall of the nostril up enough and if we look at the top of the nostril, it's meeting the skin here. This is the side trunk of the nose that runs all the way down here. And this will probably be the weirdest shaped nose you would make a pyrography portrait out of. I don't think you get many people with noses like this. It's a pretty cool adventure to burn such a weird shaped nose. I suppose if you can master this shape, then a normal nose would be an absolute doddle for you. I'm still just flicking the heat, flicking pen up, building this nose. Now he has a tip to his nose on this picture, does Dobby, and it runs round here. So there is like an underneath dark patch to the tip of the nose. So we mark that in. And on the view that we've got, because the main portion of the face we're seeing is this side, so the angle of this is going to be slightly wider here, and then it's going to tail off thinner as it wraps off round the tip. So if we move a board round to the right direction, we can keep building a shade and shape of this nose. What we're trying to achieve is like a wrapped round sort of effect, coming from underneath and round. So obviously your darkest point will always be at the base. So I start my touchdowns at the base point, because that's when it's going to be its hottest as the pen, as it hits the wood. and just follow the shadow up for a moment, and then as this nostril meets the skin, these lots of little wrinkles and little shading areas does Dobby, so he's quite an intricate piece to work on if you want to do him in real detail. There's lots of detail to be had. Okay, so we just carry on building this nostril, and we're gently shading from the outside, looking to capture the shape. Like, reminds me like of a turnip nose. Does Dobby's nose shaped like a turnip or something? This side of this nostril goes thinner and thinner at the bottom. As it meets this main turnip shape. So you can see here, this is the end of his nose. So if we get round to the right side, then just to mark it in, then it has a pointy bit sticking out on the end. So put our strokes right up to there, leave the point. Okay, so then, sorry, I've had to keep pausing the video every now and again when I've had interruptions, so I do apologise. And we're looking at trying to build some depth to a nostril, just got to imagine the shape. I think there'll be a bottom piece to it, the underneath, which will be darker, which wraps round the side here of the nostril. Remember, all your values will always keep changing as you work on a piece, and if you darken one area up, then it can affect other areas, and you'll find you'll have to change your values quite often. But when you're very first starting out on a certain structure, you want to put everything in very lightly. All this leading up to the bridge of the nose of Dobby, he has lots of little wrinkles and divots that go up to his main trunk. So the main trunk of the nose is coming down here, there's the main light source on the front of it. But at this stage we're still very much just trying to capture some shape. Move our board round again. This is what we call layering. So wood does take layers of heat. That's why we don't have a wood burner set too high. I mean, I've got my setting at 2 with a medium space shader, so it's not very high at all on the heat. And we want to build into the shape we're doing, and if we've got a heat setting too high, we won't be able to do that. You'd have to work far too fast to try and keep up with the heat of the pen. The pen's dictating the heat to you, which is something you want to avoid. Here is the offside of his nose. So that will be like, you know, you won't really see, you know, like the nostril, you can't see it, can you? So we can just add a little bit of depth just by putting a line down there. Excuse me, my picture's just gone. Likewise on the other side here. We start coming to the shadow around his other eye. So there's going to be no light at all getting to this area. So at the moment we're just looking where break points are and where all the values are going. as we start to feel out the shape. Remember I said he's got this little trunk. To the nose there. Excuse me, have a drink of my brew. So we're still trying to capture that curl. I don't know if a light is... Sometimes when you work under lamp light,